That'll give you street cred.
Paper clips. Gold paper clips.
Okay. Great. Well, welcome everybody. I appreciate you coming to the panel here. And the title of the panel is "What Color is Your Cyber Parachute?" My name's Cliff Neve. I'm a managing partner with Mad Security. Former retired Coast Guard officer, and been in cybersecurity for a little while. I'm used to being the dumbest person in a group, but rarely is it as pronounced as it is here with the folks that I have on my panel up on stage here. So I'm going to let them do an overwhelming majority of the talking because they're all way smarter than I am. We're going to talk about different types of jobs that are in cyber. We're going to talk about how you can tell which jobs might be for you, as well as strategies, recommendations, and requirements for certain jobs that they may have come across, and any types of stumbling blocks or whatever that might be able to inform you on how to get to where they are, or help you get to where you want to be within cybersecurity. What I want to do first is kind of do a little bit of a baseline, and essentially this is the nice framework with cybersecurity. And so the way that it's organized is among disciplines. So what they say is, security provision, operate, maintain, protect, defend, analyze, collect, investigate, and then they have different blocks for the different types of positions that are available within those fields. And there's a very diverse group of blocks there, ranging from being a lawyer within cybersecurity to being a threat analyst and everything in between. And so that's one way of looking at the view, and one that I would recommend that you all kind of keep in mind as you look at your career. I also kind of have my own way of looking at things, which is a slightly different view, and that the first block in my mind are entrepreneurs, leaders, policymakers, the talking heads, the people who, frequently aren't really in the game technically, right? And then you have the folks who are mostly in the game from a technical perspective, maybe not your bits and bytes, ones and zeros folks, your auditors, your intel personnel, some of those types of things. And then you have the folks that are where the sausage is made, the security operations center folks, the technical testers, the firewall folks, forensics, incident response, etc. So I think one of the first things that you need to figure out is like which of those groups generally you're going to fall in. And so what I'll do is, again, here's the higher level ones like leadership and management, training and education, systems requirements planning don't require a huge technical background. Ones like digital forensics do, software engineering clearly, exploitation analysis definitely, and then you get the ones that are kind of in between with information assurance compliance and all source intelligence and things like that. So what I'm going to do though is I'm going to back up a little bit and keep this up here, and what I'd like to do at this point is introduce the panel, and actually let me go to this slide here. And so who we have is we have Amlie Koran, who's the Deputy CIO of HHS in the Office of the IG. Candace, who's right here, she's a security engineer for Mad Security. Trey Maxam is with Coast Guard Cybersecurity Operations Center. And Kazi Islam is with House of Reps. And like I said, all of them have very strong technical backgrounds. And so what I'd like to do is go ahead and I'll start with Candace. I'll start with Candace, and I'll ask the question. Where do you find yourself on this chart, and what do you currently do?
There's a question.
Before you go into that, can you please make a point to speak closer into the microphones, everyone? Because we don't have enough microphones for bodies, and they're not hearing you. It's not your fault. Like right on one.
Sure. Is that better?
It's not worse.
Is that better?
It's on. Hey.
Okay. There we go. Yeah, I'll turn it off.
No, leave it on.
All right. Okay, Candace.
I fall into the more. Is that one on? I don't
No,
know.
hold it right up to your mouth like a lollipop.
You gotta just pull it out. No, just stop. There's switch. Yeah.
I fall more into the technical realm of that. I do engineering, and I like fixing broken things. So typically what I do for MAD. I just recently transitioned more into a sales engineering position to help people, our customers, to get the correct products that they have for their needs. I don't want to eat the mic.
You gotta kind of eat it.
Don't want to eat it. But yeah, so I fall more in the technical realm of the NIST framework.
Okay, and when you say more technical, is it more like penetration testing, security operations center analysis? What types of things mostly have you been doing?
I typically do product deployments, like the McAfee SIM. I go out on site with clients and install, deploy, train, configure for them. That's what I was doing previously. Now I do sales engineering. So.
Gotcha. All right, Trey.
So I'm the branch chief for event detection on the CSOC watch floor. And so in that capacity, I'm more managerial, but we also have a position that's staffed 24/7 that oversees the Coast Guard SOC as well as the help desk and the Enterprise Operations Center. And so in that position, I'm more one of those security operations center types. So those are kind of the two positions I fall under, if that makes sense.
Great, thanks. Kazi.
Hi, I'm a firewall engineer with the House of Reps, and basically I'm the infrastructure defender. My previous position was more SOC related, so that's where I gained most of my experience.
Great.
And for me, microphone. I've done all of those, but I'm now a manager. So as a C-level, I think I'm in a unique position to try to leverage the soft skills that a lot of us tend to not develop very well into trying to sell why all of that is good. But currently I'm doing a lot of times translating down from leadership, their demands, what their vision is, down to the technical people who need to make it happen, and then of course from the technical people, all the stuff they find, make sure that gets translated up, dealing with budget, resources, and so forth. So it's that kind of, I hate to say middle management, but it's that necessary translation layer. I just feel unique because I've kind of done all that stuff.
You cut across a lot of the targets. And Candace, I'm going to let you talk into this one.
Okay.
And so, why did you get into cybersecurity, and roughly at what age did you get into it? And what made you go into IT security?
I always loved computers. All through middle school, I was constantly in the principal's office for breaking their computers and installing things that weren't supposed to be able to be installed and whatnot. So I was always interested in it. After that, I went into high school. I took all the computer courses that my high school offered and was told women can't do that pretty much at every turn. And I'm obstinate, so that just made me want to do it more. So that's pretty much how I got into it.
Great. Trey, what made you get into cybersecurity? Was it early on in high school, or was it later on collegiately, or
it was in high school. I originally knew I wanted to be an astronaut, and then when they canceled the space shuttle program, I had to find a different career, and so I chose cybersecurity because I really enjoyed my computer science classes in high school. And after that, I went into the Coast Guard, and I quickly figured out they don't have any software developers as far as in the Coast Guard. So I kind of pivoted over and started going more in the security side of what the Coast Guard offered, and so that's where I am now.
So you were you were a freshman at the academy. Did you already know going into college what you wanted to major in, or when you got there, did you make the decision then based upon any information?
I knew I wanted to be an engineer, and I knew I really liked computers, and so I kind of fell into both operations research and electrical engineering. It's kind of a good fit for me, but I did not. I would have preferred a computer science or computer engineering degree, but they didn't offer that, so that's why I fit into electrical engineering, and I'm really happy I did, because electrical engineering gives you a totally different view of the whole cybersecurity mindset compared to computer scientists, which typically a lot of people we work with. So,
great. And Kazi, when did you find out you wanted to go into IT security?
I was always good technically. As a kid, I just kind of loved playing with technology, and basically, I wanted to make video games because we got Atari, so obviously every kid's dream is to make video games. So later on, it transitioned into a career. I said, might as well turn my hobby into a career.
Awesome. You don't want to date yourself by saying whether it's an Atari 2600 or 5200.
2600.
Okay,
yeah,
gotcha. All right, Emily.
So I thought I was going to date myself. That actually, there's a thing called the BBS, bulletin board systems. That's how old I am. So, back in the day, that was what kind of got my interest, because you were finding stuff that was cracked games and learning, what was copy protection and really kind of digging down. I was the kid that would take apart clocks and sort of get them back together. But that curiosity was one of those things that as I got into a college program, which was originally computer engineering, and then found out that there was no computer security stuff there, but I was supporting a master's program at my university that actually had a security component to it. So I was just innately interested in what was available then, even though it wasn't formalized. And it wasn't until probably about 3 or 4 years after graduation that I got my first actual full-time security gig, and that would have been just about the 2000. And for that I also blame Sneakers. If anyone's seen that movie, that's usually was also inspiring. Hey, they're doing cool stuff. It's interesting. It's kept my attention for 2 hours. I want to find a way to do that as well. So, I got media inspired as well. Not hackers. Definitely not hackers.
Nice. So Candace, you kind of mentioned that you kind of dug in a little bit, and one of the reasons you went in was because you were stubborn, and you wanted to prove everybody wrong. So throughout your career, and throughout your walk within cybersecurity, what did you find out about yourself besides that you were stubborn? What else did you find out that led you down a certain path to where you are, whether it was, wanting to be more technical, wanting to work more with people or less with people, or whatever the case might be?
I've had a lot of different jobs throughout my life, a lot of different roles, so I just kind of sussed out what I liked and what I didn't like. I'm not a people person, so managing people is not a strong suit of mine, so I avoid that. I like dwelling in the basement alone in the dark with my computer. That's my jam. So managing is not something I was ever interested in, but I am very technical and I like taking things apart. I have that curiosity and that drive. I started out doing IT help desk. I did some networking. I took a few college courses through my degree. I did some forensics classes. I really enjoy that. And then I was offered a job while I was still in high school, or while I was still in college, and to go work for a security company in Omaha, Nebraska. And I got to learn more about SIMs and all the different technologies that they supported, and just really fell in love with it. I mean, SIMs, you see all the things, and I'm a woman, we snoop. That's what we do. So it just naturally kind of fell right into that.
Awesome. Thanks. And then, so Trey, so you started, and when you were at the academy, they actually had a CTF program. So I think a lot of us that are a little bit far removed from college. I know when I went, my most technical class, hands-on class, I guess, was Pascal. So I didn't have the opportunity to do a lot of the other things. Can you talk a little bit about your college experience and being able to do CTF and how the academy maybe classified that?
Absolutely. So we had a cyber team at the academy, which was just awesome because you got a sports credit for sitting in a room and doing cyber stuff, which was amazing. So
I wish I had that option in high school. That would have been awesome.
So that was really, really fun. And something else that I really appreciated, it wasn't part of the cyber team, but also the NSA puts on this big competition between all the service academies. You get to set up a network, and the NSA red team goes in and basically just wrecks everything. And you get like practice defending a network with the adversary inside of it. And that was just a great experience and a lot of fun. Most of the classes, I mentioned I was an electrical engineer. We don't really have any cybersecurity classes, so they're mostly just like basic classes, networking, programming, and then a lot of communication stuff, obviously, because electrical engineering. But the cyber team is really where we were able to take those classes and apply them with a security mindset.
Great. Yeah, and one of the things I'll get into a little bit later is, I have my master's in electrical engineering, but I can't wire a lamp. And I think that that's one of the problems that we have with colleges that we have in college education, difference between the theoretical and the hands-on, and so I'll hit on that with the panel here in a little bit too. So I'm glad you got a chance to get some hands-on while you're in college. Kazi, what is, when you started, what did you learn? What has changed for you or evolved for you over time?
I've had a pretty bittersweet relationship with academia. Actually took me almost 10 years to get my bachelor's. So I started off with immediately right after high school. I think Windows NT 4.0 just came out. So one of my friends just suggested, hey, why don't we check out the class? So we went to the class, got the book, never went back. And been on that trajectory ever since. So started off as a data entry clerk and then worked my way up. But basically what I would say is college doesn't prepare you for the real workplace. So you have to have extracurricular training that you need to take. And most of the time, if one doesn't exist, you kind of have to learn it on your own. So I'm going to date myself, but I took Fortran? Yeah. I took Fortran, QBasic, Fortran, and all that other jazz. And then once I got to C++, I'm like, development is not for me. I don't want to be a coder ever.
Got it. Emily, how have things evolved for you?
So I'm probably the only one in my position that has only a bachelor's degree and no certifications. I'm completely self-taught when it comes to security. I was thrown in the deep end for my first security position, was at a Fortune 125 company that did critical infrastructure. So if you want to make sure that you're going to learn stuff very fast, find yourself in a situation like that. So a lot of times it was also building. So for me, it was my first systems engineering gig, I guess, would have been in college, as I did my first website in '93. So I had to do the research on an operating system, how to go and code and configure a web server. This is back when you got handed a pile of C and had to go and compile it and debug it and all sorts of stuff, as well as build a website that, well before anyone really kind of developed web attacks, that was robust and so forth. So as long as, for me, was lucky enough to be there as the technology was being developed, to just constantly kind of be on the cusp of paying attention to what the new thing was. But self-taught for me was, the fact is I cut time out of my day. If it wasn't something that was necessarily for work, as I mentioned, my first website was in '93. I did another one later on, just before I graduated college, that I kept around for 15 years, and I used that as a test bed. So any new technologies, security technologies for the operating systems to protect it, learning load balancing, web application firewalls, secure coding practices was all the stuff I used to do there, and then I'd bring it into work. So for all those who have a home lab or have a VM somewhere or who are on AWS mucking about there, keep it up, because I think that, as we were talking about before, a lot of college classes don't necessarily teach you that applied knowledge. I think, honestly, when I've interviewed people for positions, I get the most usefulness, I think, out of folks that have had that kind of visceral, hands-on, bang their head against the wall, drink caffeine until 4 a.m. type of experience.
Excellent. And so, Candace, when you, because we've talked a lot about, career progression and things like that. And so, what made you understand or whatever that you wanted to stick with the technology track? Like, do you ever see yourself going the management track, or are you just perfectly content with going with the technical route?
right now, I'm content staying with the technical route. 10 years from now, who knows? Maybe I get tired of fixing stuff. I really have no idea. I just kind of go where the wind blows me.
And can you talk about some of the opportunities that you've had, or the skills that you have particularly that have been sought out by companies, like that, as far as the skills you have that companies have been most interested in?
My knowledge in SIM tends to get a lot of attention. There doesn't seem to be a lot of people out there that know that well. So I get a lot of recruiters hounding me just because I have on my LinkedIn profile that I know McAfee Sim. I get probably 2 or 3 offers a week just purely based off of that. But I have a lot of certifications that I think tend to catch their eyes. When I went to school for forensics, so I have a lot of forensic-based certifications that my instructor encouraged me to get in lieu of taking a final exam. Most nerve-wracking portion of my life. By the way, pay $1,000 for an exam, and if you fail it, you also fail the class. But it helped out a lot, and I didn't fail them, so yay! But yeah, so mostly my certifications and just my work experience is really what tends to attract recruiters.
Great. And Trey, you are you're a supervisor in a security operations center. As far as the analyst, when you hire people in, or when you review people, or when you're evaluating who you want to be part of the detection team in the CSOC, what are the qualities that you're looking for?
So the primary thing we look for is just that curiosity and that problem-solving mindset. But at the same time, we work in a classified environment, so the top secret clearance is probably our biggest hindrance, and that's what keeps a lot of people out, and what makes it so hard to find people of good quality. But definitely the mindset, that security mindset, problem-solving mindset. People that are curious and aren't just going to accept whatever they see. Just there's an alert, it's probably nothing. People that want to dig into stuff and really look around. Those are the people we're looking for. So.
Great. And Kazi, so it took you a while to get your degree, and along the way, what other types of education, certifications, like what sources of knowledge did you seek out or that you find helpful?
So I think I'll give you a pragmatic answer here, because basically people look for 2 things, either vendor-specific certification or experience. In my case, it was experience. And it's good to have big names behind you. I started at Citibank, went to VeriSign, and, so on and so forth. But having names like that on your resume, gets a lot of looks. And then, on top of that, the technology that I was exposed to at those companies, it was like cutting edge. So, if you throw out names like Checkpoint, Palo Alto, Juniper, and you've actually been able to touch those things and work on it, that's what gets you. And once I got my Security Plus, that just, took me to another level. And that's what put me on track to the security path. So I think before that I was more, I was doing help desk, I was doing SOC, but then once I got my Security Plus, that's when they took notice and said, okay, maybe we'll put you in this spot.
Right. Amlie, what do you look for when you hire folks?
Well, to kind of build on the diversity aspect of it, if you go on LinkedIn, you can see, I've had as many jobs as I've been out actually in the working force. I'm very restless. I don't actually kind of ding people for the fact that they've moved around a bit. For me, that's usually a lot of times when you look at that, the time, the level of curiosity, they're trying to find the right spot. Sometimes things just don't fit. I look for stuff that people have had a list of progressions. For me, it was a matter of I was at the right place at the wrong time, or the wrong place at the right time. I've been involved with enough specific incidents that had gotten me to learn a lot of stuff. So if someone puts on there that they've been a short time, It's a matter of like, well, explain a little detail about the work that you've done. I'm not like, well, you've only been there 6 months. Well, maybe something imploded and had you move on. Also with hiring too is I want somebody who can actually talk about solving problems. When it comes to interviews, you know, I'm not the one, I hate the panel interview where you're in there like, I have a list of 7 questions. They mean absolutely nothing to me. These microphones suck. I want to give you a situation and I want to see how your mind works. Because if you're coming in to do an incident response, there is no like checklist. There is a checklist, but I mean, it's more or less like every response is going to be ever so slightly different. You're going to have to use different techniques. You're going to have to use different tools. And I want to see how people generally use their toolbox, their brain, the available software or hardware tools, to understand where the gotchas may have been, like, hey, you know, I ran this incident response before and we didn't do this in this order, or we forgot to notify our legal team. So now every time they go into incident response, they have a response team that involves legal, PR, the engineering team, the C-suite, and so forth. So it's showing that you've actually learned from that experience. So like if you come in and like your first page of resume is like all certs, I will actually ignore you because you've spent more time learning paper than actually doing. And in this environment, you know, we're constantly getting banged on every day from threat actors and so forth. I want to see people who have actually, you know, kind of thought through and worked through problems.
Great.
I may be a rare one though.
And it is always a challenge because typically when you know, those of us who have answered government RFPs know that, you know, the government will say one thing, oh, we want people with lots and lots of experience. And then, of course, they put it out and they say, oh, the key senior security engineer must have CISSP, must have masters in cybersecurity. So it's a tough balance between fighting through the acquisitions process to get to where you want to go and then really getting to who knows what they're doing. What I found, though, is that those people who really know what they're doing, companies find a way, or organizations find a way to get to those people, regardless of whether or not they meet those criteria or not. They're going to have a place. Candace, so let's say you have a chance to talk to a 16-year-old high school student who is very interested in cybersecurity. They're doing some things. What would you say to them, or what would you advise them as far as to get to where you are? What steps should they take, or what things have you learned from your life that you might do differently or might do the same for them to progress to where you are?
Start thinking about what you want to do early on. It took me a long time to decide what I wanted to do. I did a lot of different things. I bounced between IT, being a chef, being a receptionist. I had no direction or clue, and it took me a long time to get into my career because of that. So all my school counselors were always driving that, start thinking about what you want to do now, and I didn't listen, but, you know, that would be my recommendation is listen to your counselors and start thinking about what you want to do. Get a job while you're in high school. Start learning what you don't like so you can find out what you do like.
College.
Yeah, college is important.
The timing of it. We talked a little bit about it.
Yeah, so I'm not a huge advocate for college. I don't think you learn hands-on knowledge in traditional colleges, and it's not for everyone. Some people need it. Some people need to go through that structured learning environment. Other people don't. I was one of those that didn't. I would rather pick up a book on my own and figure it out than have somebody give me a bunch of pointless, meaningless assignments that I'm going to learn little to nothing from, whereas I could do a hands-on experiment with it myself and figure it out faster. But a lot of people need that structured education, so it also, again, back to what he was saying about, especially if you want to get into any kind of government job, they require you have a degree, so depending on where you want to go with your career, that's not necessarily an option to not get one.
Great, thanks. Trey, where do you see yourself, progressing throughout, Coast Guard career and then outside? Like, what kind of steps would you like to take? So you're in a CSOC now, which is a great starting place to see where everything's happening. Like, where would you like to be further on? More technical, more leadership perspective?
I really enjoy the technical aspect, but as far as I would love being in the military, and I don't see a really career where I can stay technical for that much longer. And so I would like to do a few more technical assignments. Maybe the cyber protection team is being stood up. The Coast Guard sending one of those up, that would be great. Or the Coast Guard also has assignments sending people over to like the Hunt Incident Response Team for DHS. That would be a really great assignment. But as I stay in the Coast Guard, I'm going to have to move away from the technical more to the managerial, and I'm okay with that because I really enjoy being in the Coast Guard. And there's other assignments that I'm looking at in the future that I think would also be really great, like, for example, the White House communications assignment and other assignments like that.
Great, thanks. Kazi, what are your aspirations? Like, as far as you're in working House of Reps right now, which is a cool gig for you. And so, what do you see further down the road? You also have some entrepreneurial background as far as owning your own company. Can you talk about that a little bit?
Yeah, I'm going to start off with giving you a little background. Basically, I would say be curious and have fun. Like, one summer I had 8 jobs. Okay, this is in high school. I delivered newspaper, I worked at Burger King, Dunkin' Donuts, built custom rigs for people. I mean, I did everything I could. Just absorb, be a sponge, absorb as much, because you don't know, when you're 16, you don't know what you want to do, right? And I say don't solidify what you want to do that early. Be a sponge, be curious, have fun, play, and eventually you'll figure it out. And for me, I figured it out much later, so that's why, I got my associates, but then it took me like another 8 years to get my bachelor's, right? But what I found out is when I got my associates, is once I was at Citibank, I hit a ceiling. Like, there was a barrier. They didn't want me I couldn't move up unless I had a bachelor's. So, I know people say college isn't important. It doesn't matter. It's just a piece of paper. It's not going to teach you anything, but you need that piece of paper to get in that door. And once you get in the door, you need to have these vendor certifications to move up. My aspiration, short term, would be get CISSP certified, obviously. And then long term, I would like to be in a position of being a cyber architect. I actually had, like Cliff mentioned, I had some entrepreneurial experience. I actually ran my own consulting firm in New York and even did projects for NYPD. So what I learned is that it's very hard to be an entrepreneur because I was putting in 80 to 120 hours a week. And your brain never turns off because you're constantly thinking of how to grow the business, how to progress, how to build your business. So I think it's important that once you're in a position like that, you have the necessary backing or support to move forward, because longevity is the hardest part of being in any business. It's lasting, right? A lot of people can start a business, but to make it last is the hard part.
Yes, it is. Amlie, where do you see yourself going?
So it's interesting to kind of think about, like, yeah, I'm at the sea level at this point. So for me, it's only something potentially larger. But I actually wanted to kind of pivot on what would you tell a 16-year-old version of yourself or somebody in school. One of the first things I learned once I got my first job out of college, or actually, second job out of college, when I was sent to a writing class, is the most important thing I could tell any of you in this room is learn how to communicate. We are great with technical skills. We can find whatever piece of malware we have in our environment and analyze the hell out of it. But unless you communicate as to the risks of operating in a certain fashion, or you're trying to communicate to someone at my level, and not find somebody who has a technical background like me, and you can't communicate your point of view, you can't communicate your reasoning, you're not going to get anywhere. So I'd say places like this where you get a chance to present, you learn those presentation skills. That wins the hearts and minds, and those are the folks that are going to give you the money to do the things you want to do. They're going to be the ones that are going to give you that chance to go get a certification. They're going to be the folks that are going to actually show that if you can communicate that you're curious, not just show them, they're going to be the ones who are going to promote you, whether it be in a technical branch or a managerial branch. Specifically, you're talking about you don't want to be a manager, but you want to be a manager. That's another key thing in my role here as a manager. You need to communicate to your people. If you can't reach a common lingua franca or whatever you want to call it, lexicon or whatever, you're going to have a very difficult time managing those people. So again, it's always practicing your communication skills, always work on developing them. If you have an opportunity to go to something like Toastmasters or anything like that, please do. It also keep you from getting nervous in front of a crowd of people. Specifically, if you're going to go into a CEO's office and, they're the top of the chain, it's just as scary as if you're talking to 20, 30, 100 people. So that's what I'd probably recommend. Sorry for pivoting, but like I said, it's just one of those cases, sitting at this level, it's just I would love to go further up, but I don't know where.
No, that's great. No, and I think that the pivoting, that's kind of what I'm trying to reach with the folks, with the audience here as well, is if you're a 16-year-old or you're just getting started within cybersecurity, what do you do first? So latching on to that communications, running a company, being the entrepreneur, hiring in folks, that is one of the key things that we look for, particularly from consultation perspective, because one of the things that is kind of on here is, kind of a mix. We ask a lot of our folks at Managed Security to be both technical and a consultant, which is having those communication skills. Candace has been wildly successful as a consultant. Her success rate is extraordinarily high for the engagements that she has earned, unbelievable ratings for. And so talk a little bit about, when you approach an engagement, when you approach people, and when you're trying to explain things, technically, some of the challenges that you might have had with communications and how you've been able to overcome them, or how you approach that, because you've killed it from my perspective.
I don't really have a method or a way to advise people to do that. I guess it just kind of comes natural to me. Read the room. If you're talking to somebody that has no technical background and you start using all kinds of technical jargon and talking, and they're giving you the deer in the headlights look, maybe tone it down a bit. Take it back and explain it like you're talking to a child. Don't sound patronizing, but sometimes that's what you have to do, because not everybody will be as technical as you, or maybe you're not as technical as somebody else, and they're trying to explain something to you, and they make you feel dumb because they're talking to you in a language you don't understand. My number one advice for that is just know your audience and read the room.
Great, thanks. And Trey, I know that you work in an organization where the cybersecurity is more of an enabling function as well. How are you able to communicate with some of your peers that maybe aren't within that? What methods or what have you been able to learn to increase your ability to communicate?
So we've actually been pretty, lucky at CG Cyber because we're a brand new organization within the Coast Guard, and we've kind of handpicked the people that work with us. So I do work with a lot of really technical people, which is great because there's a really in-depth understanding of the Coast Guard network. There are a lot of subject matter experts that really know exactly what they're talking about. But there are, every once in a while, you get someone in the organization that really loves cyber, really wants to learn, but just doesn't know what a network is. And so with those people, they have the willingness to learn, especially the people at CG Cyber. They really want to know. So it's just taking time and teaching them what they want to know, because they have the willingness to learn. They're intelligent. They just don't have the experience.
Great, thanks. And Kazi, as far as the timing goes, would you recommend that someone who's graduating from high school go directly to college if they're going to do that, or would you recommend?
Oh, absolutely, yeah. I would say don't. Like I said, I had a bittersweet relationship. So the fact that I had to finish my degree with a wife and 2 kids, it just made it exponentially harder. If I had gone directly to college and, kind of had my mindset that this is what I wanted to do and finish up and then went into my career, it would have been a lot easier. Yeah, definitely.
Great, thanks. And then, Amlie, I just kind of want you to, to kind of offer whatever sage words you might have to somebody who's just kind of starting in. What is it like, your big picture overview?
Well, for me, it's like I bounced around a bit. I mean, like for me, I started out at my first job was a user interface designer for Xerox. So I honestly did not enter this career with any idea that I was going to enter this career. I started out with a computer engineering degree, and I look back at it like, really, did I need to spend that tuition on that? I'm pushing from the federal side. We just had a CISO salon breakfast thing on Thursday where I'm sitting there with the CISO of Secret Service and folks from DoD and OPM and DHS, and trying to get them around the fact that let's not push the whole you need a degree thing. There's a lot of bright people out there that don't want to incur the costs, that have situations where you have different life choices that you want to make. Let's look at this at the aptitude. Are you curious? Can you problem solve? A lot of those, like specifically federal, doesn't capture that. Specifically like the public debates right now about, tuition debt. And folks don't want to get themselves, fresh out of high school into $100,000, $200,000 debt to get them a career that's going to take them 10 years to pay that back. So it's a matter of trying to make those wise choices. Sometimes there's a balance that you can go to school and do your career. I know when I graduated college, it was just at the cusp of the .com, but I decided to go get a stable job because I had bills to pay. It's those tough choices. I mean, I could have gone out to Silicon Valley and done all that, but everything's individual. Don't feel bad. Your choices are your choices. I haven't had a situation when I've looked at hiring people, or I've been in a situation myself where I felt bad about a choice I made. You can, but I don't think it's actually hampered me. I haven't, when I've been hiring people, looked at what they've done and said, geez, if you would have just stayed here a little bit longer, this could have helped you. No. Everyone's got a reason that they've moved on. Everyone's got a reason for the choices they've made. It's your life, live it. And most of all, if you're not having fun, stop doing it. If you're not, you're gonna drive yourself into a depressive spiral. You're not gonna enjoy your work. You're not gonna bring your whole self to work. And sometimes I think, you're talking that you went, you were a receptionist. You went into being a chef. We've had, I can't remember, Eve Adams, who stepped out of cybersecurity to go and, go into food stuff. Take a break sometimes too. Do something different. It will reinvigorate you. For me, it's like I go in the pool and it just kind of like resets me every day. Sometimes it's worth taking a break. I know there's plenty of talks on burnout from InfoSec. I don't do forensics anymore because I got burned out from doing that. I don't do malware because I've got ADD. I can't concentrate. So, sometimes you're going to have to kind of, fish your way like salmon through the water to try to figure out like what works for you. For me right now as a manager, and a C-level person, it works, but there may be a time where I'm just tired of the politics and I'll move on. Don't be afraid to make those choices as well.
Great, thanks. And so at this point, I'd like to see if anybody in the audience has any questions. I've kind of wrapped up with mine. Yes, sir.
Is that a good way of managing that communication with those?
Absolutely. I actually started off teaching A+ and MCSE, just not because I was good at it, but because I wanted to solidify my knowledge. Teaching is the hardest job I would say anybody can ever do. It not only reinforces your knowledge, it helps you grow those communication skills, those soft skills that, are much needed, that not get much focus in this industry particularly. I think, even if you do a computer science major or CIS, they will do maybe 1 or 2 English class or business writing, and that's it. The only time you actually collaborate with people is at the end when you're doing your project. that's like one class out of 4 years where you actually learn how to work with a team, and like he had a great experience with Capture the Flag, but you know, most companies, most institutions don't have that type of experience.
Yeah, I was going to say about the teaching aspect too, is much like giving presentations, is you're, by the art of regurgitating, doing that communications thing, you're running through your thoughts to basically do a check on that. But also, I guess if you want to work into some cognitive psychology of it, that combination of basically recall, regurgitation, audio back is this feedback loop that basically starts to develop those patterns in your head, so that, like, if you're doing an incident response, like if you're communicating having done this procedure in a verbal environment, you're teaching people like that, it gets in your brain so that it just becomes a reflex later. Like, you just know what to do. You're not having to go and look at the book. So, you know, that's another advantage from going and doing that type of teaching.
Something else that is also a benefit to that I found when I give training is that your students or the people that you're teaching will ask you questions and give you a fresh perspective on things. Like, maybe they bring up a topic you never, or a question you don't know the answer to. So it provides you an opportunity for growth of your knowledge as well by getting input back from other people.
Thanks. Any other questions? Internships.
I think internships are a great opportunity. So I did an internship that actually got me my TS clearance, and that's what got me the job where I am now. And so it's a great learning opportunity because you get to be around people that maybe do something that you've never done before. And I highly recommend.
Yeah. Oh, so one last thing on the internships. The government has tons of them that we sponsor. If you've done Scholarship for Service, definitely that gets you connected, but definitely pay attention to job postings either around December or earlier part of this year, is when usually the agencies will actually post for internship positions. They may be low-level GS grades, but they get you into the door. And sometimes a lot of those, depending on where you are in your classes and stuff like that, can be turned around into a full-time job. So yes, definitely, thumbs up on that.
I wanted to piggyback on that question a little bit because I teach the BDOE just released a high school standards for cybersecurity just this summer. So next year I'm going to actually transition my computer system class into a cybersecurity program. It's a 2-year program for a lot of public schools. So I have a lot of students that, like right now, they're graduating with, I have about half of them that are preparing for Security Plus. They've already got their A+, and A+ Security Plus. And so internship opportunities, I was listening earlier, you were talking about like how private industry maybe feel a little bit more open to students that can enter into like an internship type thing without having college, right? Because most of the opportunities that I see all have that minimum requirement of must be pursuing a bachelor's or master's degree in so and so. So one thing I like to do, and I even have the autonomy within my program to give them work release during the day. But it seems like I'm hitting a brick wall every time I try to set a 16, 17, 18-year-old kid that has the skills and been working on the certifications and just wants to get that experience that you were talking about, and they've been doing the CTFs that you were talking about, but they just can't find it. I want to have
Go ahead.
Yeah, I was actually going to say that's a failure a lot of times on the company's fault or the organization's fault. So one of the things that always rubbed me the wrong way is, as I've progressed through my career, is I don't see people at my level showing up to BSides or ShmooCon or sometimes even DEF CON and some of those things. They're not coming to where the people are and speaking about this. And that is one of the things I'm pushing from my level, trying to change. Like, hey, you need to go out to these things. Like, this is where the people are really hungry. This is where you connect with the next level of talent. So, to understand that you've got high school students, I'm like, if there's, can we develop a program that reaches out to high school students before they're in college? This is just, it's this feedback of evolution. So now that I know, I can like, hey, DHS, why don't you look local, So.
I will tell you too that running a company, persistence matters. We get a lot of folks who are like, "Hey, I want to be an intern," it's a little bit of an investment of our time as a company, and we make it. We do have, I think we're only a 50-person company, and I think we have 7 interns right now. So we make that investment. But I can tell you that usually the ones that we're the most impressed with are the ones who just continue, pounding. Because that shows that, hey, this person really wants to do this. This person's really interested. They're not just, hey, and we also, we pay our interns. A lot of times there's unpaid interns because I think that there needs to be some skin in the game, some incentive for the person to actually do work. We don't view it as an unskilled labor thing. So we actually expect a level of performance, which I think prepares them for that, and it also washes things out, because we have done a lot of hiring from interns to our company. Any other questions? Yes, sir.
Do you have any words of advice for older workers that are trying to make a transition into cybersecurity?
I can kind of help there. So, I guess I would almost qualify as that. I was an IT person without much of a technical skill set. It depends on the level of technical capability you have, but a lot of times somebody who has a lot of experience does understand risk and does understand how companies work, how missions work, because of their expertise. And I think that going into like compliance or governance, risk, and compliance, that's an area it's one of the few semi-technical things that I can do, because I can go through a checklist, I can research the controls in that checklist, and I can go into a company and from a risk management perspective do that. I can't put my hands on anything to do anything like that, but I think that information assurance is a good place for somebody who has a good concept of, a good experience with businesses.
Yeah, for me it was, I found some really good hires that I found internal. So, one of my first best engineering hires was somebody who was working help desk. And they pinged in, it's like, hey, there's, you guys are doing some cool stuff. It's like, well, would you like to scrub in on some stuff and, partner with somebody? And the key thing is, at least in organizations, is to reach out to those other teams. So, like, if you're working the networking team, say you're a network engineer, and you're not on the cybersecurity team, like, hey, next time you guys are running a response, can I just sit and watch? Develop those relationships. That's, again, the soft skills, just kind of trying to find. If you're trying to transition from one company to another, that's a little bit more difficult. That's where doing the training and stuff like that kind of comes in. Again, it's a lot of luck trying to find the right hiring manager that's willing to kind of take a chance. For me, I've always drilled the point home, like, if they've got the technical chops, we can teach the cyber. Conversely, like, if they got cyber, I really hope they have technical chops. If I get a lot of IA people that are like, I do audit and I'm going to be super cyber, I'm like, not really. I need you to do some system administration. Or I'll ask them, like, do you run a home network? And have them explain that. Because if they can do that, it's more or less like, okay, well, then we can give you, we can have you sit with the networking team for 6 months and develop that kind of skill to get familiar with the environment.
I think also, for an older adult who's trying to transition into this industry, it would be really helpful if you do gigs. Like, when I was running my consulting firm, I went to Clip Hunter and just posted a job when I needed it for the NYPD project, for example. And then, just go on Freelancer, set up a profile, put up what skills you're willing to work with and what you're willing to do and at what rate, and just do those side gigs. That helps you get in the door. It gets those things on your resume, and which can, basically